So definitely we have moved towards a world where the hegemony or the apex nature of the US currency is under threat. And this will have a major impact on the Indian economy as well. Hi everyone, welcome to today's video. So on today's video, I will speak about how Russia is strengthening its economy. Second key point is how that will impact India and the US economy and the stock markets at large. And third and finally, what you should be doing as an investor in this situation. This is an extremely important video because it can help you redesign your portfolio. But before I start the core of the discussion, a very important story for all of you, and this is a story that we must have heard even as kids. So it's the Jungle Ka Raja story. So if in the jungle everyone knows that the lion or the sher is the Jungle Ka Raja or the king of the jungle, then there is peace, stability in that jungle and everything goes smoothly. Whatever the natural process and the course of action is, it will be followed. There is peace, stability in that situation. Why? Because everyone knows who the leader is. That is the same situation that is there in the world today, that the world understands that the apex currency is the US dollar. Everyone understands that and the world trade goes smoothly. But imagine this situation that the Jungle Ka Raja is not the sher anymore or the lion anymore and everyone is fighting to become the king of the jungle. Then there is a lot of instability, lot of bloodbath till the point another king is appointed. So the argument that I will make is that something similar might play out in the world very, very soon. I am not joking about this. This is a very serious topic. So please listen to all the arguments. I am relating history, finance, economics. Please give it a thumbs up if you like me making this type of content. So let us get the analysis started. 3 key points that we will understand. So first and foremost, let me help you understand that what exactly is Russia currently doing and why is it a genius strategy, so to say. 3 key things that Russia is doing. The first thing is that Russia's central bank is buying more and more gold. It is aggregating all of its gold supply from its local sources. Western media is telling us that, hey, Russia is selling gold. No, it is not selling gold. Russian central bank is actually consolidating all the gold supply that is there in Russia currently. Why is Russia doing it? That is a very interesting conversation. First and foremost, take a look at this particular chart. It shows the price difference between Brent crude. Brent crude is internationally acceptable crude. It's a variety of crude. And Urals, which is a Russia-based crude oil. You will see something very, very interesting that there was 0% difference, almost 0% difference between Brent and Urals, and this existed up until 2022. And what happened in 2022? The Russia-Ukraine crisis broke out and a lot of Western countries imposed sanctions on Russian crude. As a result, this difference between international crude and Russian crude became 30%. Why? Because the demand of the Russian crudes went down. So as a result, the Russian oil became inexpensive and international crude oil became really expensive. Now the exact same scenario is playing out when it comes to a commodity like gold. That internationally the prices of gold is rising, but domestically within Russia the prices of gold is falling. So the Russian central bank thinks of it as a great opportunity to buy a ton of gold. So they are buying crazy amounts of gold and consolidating all the supply of gold. So you'll say, okay, great, wonderful that the Russian government is able to consolidate all the gold that is within Russia. But how can this help Russian government at a global level? So this brings us to the second step of the Russian government's plan. So what they are doing is that they are buying a lot of gold. Gold helps you generate a lot of trust because you might have seen that before 1970s, when the world did not exist on fiat money. Fiat money is government printed money. It was pegged to gold. In order to release $1 in the economy, the US government used to buy an equivalent amount of gold and keep it in its reserves. But that system has been done away with and we have moved towards a fiat system. So the current currency system that exists in the world has lesser trust. But that gold-based system that used to exist previously, it was a very trustworthy system, so to say. Because gold as a commodity is trusted by everyone. So let me walk into explaining step 2 of the plan. So buy a lot of gold, generate trust because you have a lot of gold. Then strengthen your local currency or demand for your local currency. Now, how is the Russian government strengthening the demand of ruble? Now, you might have heard that Russia is a big exporter of oil. So far what used to happen was that when Russian government used to sell a big consignment of oil to any European country, they used to ask for US dollars. Now what they are going to do is that they have changed the system. When you buy oil from Russia, you will have to pay them in ruble. So this switch in trading strategy is strengthening the demand for ruble. That's part A. Part B, due to excess buying of gold, this again depicts more trust on ruble. So the game plan is very simple by the Russian government, that they are strengthening the entire demand of ruble by every passing day. Take a look at this particular chart. This shows the relationship between ruble and US dollar. And you can see that ruble used to be very fairly stable up until this point. Then it shot up in its strength after Russia invades Ukraine, and then it started falling down. And now the Russian government has made the announcement here, then they are going to buy more gold and strengthen their gold reserve. So this acts as a second shot in arm, which will strengthen the Russian ruble, no doubt about that. This brings us to the third step of the Russian government game plan, which is to build a self-sufficient economy. In today's day and age, it is almost impossible for a country to be completely self-reliant, and even Russia will not be completely self-reliant. But it has found partners in countries like China that will continue to support Russia. Having said this, Russia is in a very good shape to move towards a self-sufficiency system. Why is that? Take a look at the foreign trade data for Russia. And here's a chart for you, and you will clearly see that Russia for decades has been a net exporter over being a net importer. So in India, we are net importers of a variety of things that we consume in India. But Russia, net is an exporter, not an importer of things. So therefore, the world depends more on Russia, rather Russia being dependent on the world. That is a very important point to keep in mind for us to understand the next section, which is that how will this particular game plan of the Russian government impact India and the US? So there will be two layers of impact on India and the US's economy. One will be short term and another will be long term. So let's talk about short term very briefly, that in the short term, there will be no major impact on either India and the US. Why? Because Russia's contribution to the world GDP is only 3%. So of course, that's not a huge number to impact or destabilize the world trade in the short term. That's part A. Part B is that many parts of the world or many parts of the global economy, for example, European Union, it depends a lot on Russian oil. So yes, there are short-term disruptions when it comes to procuring this Russian oil, but new supply chains can be created, new semiconductor demand can be explored from other parts of the world, so on and so forth. So yes, there is a little bit of short-term pain that the world is already going through, but in the short-term to mid-term, there is no major pain that the world is going to see. Now comes the long-term story, and here the picture changes completely. First and foremost, you need to understand that if this Russian experiment of creating a self-sufficient economy succeeds, then it acts as a proof of concept for a lot of other nations to decouple from the world economy. So we might move towards a structure or a system where the following thing might happen, that this is the world and you have Russia, which is existing in a bubble or a short bubble supported by China. Then you will have a bunch of South Asian countries that might exist in a bubble. Then you will have US and Mexico existing in their own bubble. So this is not a good news from a world trade perspective and a world's growth perspective, but this is where the world is likely to move. In fact, Mr. Ray Dalio has written a book on this entire topic, which if there is enough interest, I will decode that for you. It is called as Changing World Order. So go and read it. It's a wonderful book. I have just completed reading it, and all the commentary that he has given makes a lot of sense. The second key thing that might happen is that the peace in the jungle might get destabilized. How? Because right now, all the nations in the world understand that US dollar is the apex currency of the world. No one is trying to challenge that hegemony, maybe except for China. But now what will happen is that Russia is already challenging that and it is coming up with a structure. So it definitely hits the US dollar. China has already built an alternate to a SWIFT system. It is moving towards that. This hits the US dollar. Now European nations might also want to change something around euro. They will create their own community and will transact in that. Many countries in the world are trying to come up with their central bank digital currencies. So they are also trying to challenge the dominance of the US systems. Also, alternate form of technologies are coming up. For example, in the US, we have something called as XRP Ripple. That is challenging the existing banking system in the US. So as a result, from a global level, countries are challenging the US dollar and the new technologies are also challenging the US dollar. So definitely we have moved towards a world where the hegemony or the apex nature of the US currency is under threat. And this will have a major impact on the Indian economy as well. So let us try to understand why would that be the case, because right now I'm saying that, okay, countries are fighting to bring down US dollar. But now, Akshat, you're telling us that it will have impact on India also. So I'm getting a little bit confused. Why is that the case? The reason there is very simple, that the Indian economy is interlinked to the US economy. Indian stock markets are very, very strongly interlinked to the US stock markets. Can I prove that? Absolutely. So take a look at two charts. This is from S&P 500 and the second chart is Nifty 50 chart. Please go pause the video, study it, zoom both the charts and you will see a lot of patterns forming out. For example, take a look at 2008 crash. That crash started where? It started in the US. It happened because of subprime crisis that happened in the US. As a result, the US market, S&P, it fell by roughly 50 to 60%. What happened in India? Even the Indian stocks fell by 50 to 60%. Was it India's fault? The answer is no. Was it US's fault? Yes, that is where the housing bubble burst, but it impacted the Indian market equally or even worse. Second key point, if you take a look at 2020 COVID crisis, again, check how much did the US stocks fell by? Roughly again by 40 to 50%. How much did the Indian Nifty fell by? Roughly again 40 to 50%. Why is this happening? This is simply happening because of the world that India trades almost everything internationally in US dollar. So if the US dollar goes down and takes a hit, even the Indian economy will get impacted. Now you might ask me that, okay Akshat, India can also go the Russia way. It can start buying gold, strengthening its own domestic ecosystem, all that stuff. Can it not do that? The answer is no. We cannot create a self-sufficient economy. Now, please do not make it a political nationalistic debate. I will show you the data to prove my point. And this is not a criticism against government. I am simply trying to teach you macroeconomics that people do not teach. So take a look at this data. This shows year by year trade deficit that India has. Trade deficit simply means that we are exporting less and importing a lot more. So as a result, we are dependent on external trade. This is the complete opposite picture when it comes to Russia. So they can strengthen ruble, but we need to still transact in a free floating or a fiat currency till the time the countries with whom we are trading, they are trading on fiat currencies. So India has no option but to play along and tag along with the US. If US economy falls or US stock markets fall, India's stock market and Indian economy will also fall. There is absolutely no doubt about that. Now let's talk about the final section, that if you are an investor, then what should you be doing and what are the things that you should be thinking about. First, from a short-term perspective, you don't need to panic. Markets are already up. The entire Russia-Ukraine crisis has already been factored into the market. So short-term dynamics of the market seems to have stabilized, so to say. Can it fall further? Of course, it can fall further, but at least the impact has been absorbed into the markets as of now. So right now, you just need to invest sensibly in India, US stock market, etc., etc. Nothing major is going to happen in the short term. Number two, please keep a very close eye on this Russian experiment of buying gold and strengthening the ruble, because if other countries tag along with Russia, because many parts of the world are not super happy with the US, they might jump onto this structure system and make China the new lion of the jungle, and that can spell doom for the world, at least for a foreseeable future. Let me know in the comment box, what do you think? That if China becomes something like US and if it becomes the king of the jungle, what happens to the world? I would love to read your theory on this. Third and finally, both in the short term and the long term, it is time now to become a diversified investor. The game of being a concentrated investor for retail investors is over. As far as I can tell you, I'm giving very strong opinions here, but I'm backing it up with fact and data. Please be diversified investor, because a lot of macroeconomic things are playing out and the structure of the world literally is changing. Why am I saying it? Because there are a lot of countries in the world that cannot create self-fulfilling economies. For example, India cannot become a self-fulfilling economy. And if there is any major impact on India, your investments in the Indian stock market will take massive hit. So please invest and diversify outside India also. I will not name which countries. You can figure it out, whichever countries you want to invest in, whichever assets you want to invest in, because the moment I talk about some new age asset, people call it dark currency, this, that. So I don't want to tinge this video through that lens, but I would request you to think about different asset classes in which you can diversify. A fundamental truth that is definitely happening is that the US is losing its edge and the US dollar is on a downfall. How soon will it fall? No one can say, but when it falls, it will create havoc in the market. And if you have not been intelligent with your investing style, it has massive potential to ruin your financial well-being. So please be diversified, understand this development. This is a very important development, and share it with your friends. I hope you enjoyed the video and I will see you tomorrow.